Hi, I'm Leanpub from Leanpub, and in this episode of the Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Barret, Nobel, and Jake Montalbano. Barret provides elite fitness and life coaching for dads and is the host of the DadFit podcast, the go-to podcast for athlete dads or dads who aspire to be athletes. You can follow him on Twitter at Barret Nobel Fit and check out his website at barretnobel.com and subscribe to his YouTube channel at Barret Nobel Fitness. Jake is a football coach and English teacher, I believe, who's been married for 14 years and is father of 3. Barret and Jake are the authors of the Leanpub book, The DadFit Dynasty Manual, Daily Modern Strategies. In their book, Barret and Jake write with the modern father in mind, offering practical actions you can take to make a tangible difference in your life and the lives of your loved ones. Whether it's about balancing work with family, maintaining a thriving marriage, staying fit, or guiding your children with wisdom and love, this book addresses it all. In this interview, we're going to talk about their backgrounds and approaches to fitness, the book, and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about their work as content creators. So thank you very much, Barret and Jake, for being on the Leanpub Front Matter podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks.
Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I always like to start this podcast by asking people for their origin stories. So why don't we start with you, Barret, if you could take a few minutes and just talk a little bit about how you made your way into the sort of career you're in now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I started as a personal trainer when I was in my early 20s, but I was an alcoholic, and so I was kind of an asshole. Oh, sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I started as a personal trainer in my early 20s. I was like an alcoholic, so I was kind of an asshole to all my clients, and I realized customer service wasn't really for me at that point. So I got more into the engineering side, became a software engineer, went up the ranks of enterprise engineer, cloud engineer, just all sorts of desk jockeying. Got super jaded with the industry and burnt out. Throughout that whole time, I've always been into fitness and nutrition. It's always been like a real common theme for anything that I do. I'm always the strongest engineer in any of the groups I'm in, which is like a very prideful thing for me. But then I started transitioning away from the engineering world, less desk jockeying. I really became super interested in just trying to improve men's lives in general. I see a severe lacking of that in the current world that we're in. I became a father a couple of years ago. And like, if we talk about it a lot on my podcast, but I'll be at the park and I'll see all these dads and moms just phones in their faces, not playing with their kids. They're not in great shape. They won't even run around with their kids, and there just needs to be more strong men, and there's lack of strong men as role models for the current world. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as transitioning into all this fatherhood, fitness, and it's all like a really great encompassing way that I'm working in.
And Jake, what about you? What's your background?
So for me, I actually started out, doing, as a coach and coaching and helping young men and kind of seeing what happens when there's fatherless homes and, kids that maybe their only positive male role model is a coach of some sort. And so that was the first thing that really opened my eyes to just the negative effects of what happens without strong present fathers. And then as I kind of got going in my marriage and having kids of my own, I actually, it became the exact dad that we're trying to help right now. And to say that I allowed myself to become that unhealthy dad who was there physically, but not really emotionally there, and, not really playing and being active with my kids. I let myself get, like I said, very unhealthy at one point. I've written about this. I was actually almost 500 pounds at one point. And for me, one of the negative things, but also one of the best things that could have happened was a hospital stay. I actually almost didn't make it. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital, and that gave me all the time in the world to reflect on the bad things that I was doing, and more importantly, what I was going to do to fix it. And so when as I started to get out and I started to rebuild myself physically and really working on the relationships that I had damaged, it was pretty clear pretty quickly that I had a lot of things that I wanted to be able to say with other people, and to try to help them learn from some of the things that I've done, both good and bad, right and wrong. And so I started writing online, and with the idea of being able to help other men sort of either avoid things, or if they're already in a bad place, help them get out of it.
Yeah, and Jake, so what can you, maybe for anyone out there listening who might be struggling with their weight and things like that, what was like this? Can you remember like what was the when you decided like, okay, like, you know, you got out of the hospital and you're like, I'm going to turn this around. What was the first thing you did? Did you go buy a book? Did you go watch videos on YouTube? Did you talk to friends?
Well, it's interesting because in my background, I actually have a strength and conditioning background. And so, as far as knowing what to do from a training standpoint, and that I knew what I should have done. For me, it was more on the mental side, as far as the willingness to do it. And I think kind of for me, there was a bit of a rock bottom moment where I kind of came to the realization that I am so unhealthy that I cannot play with my kids like I want to. And so for me, it was just really a matter of creating daily habits. You know, that was the big thing for me.
Nice.
You know, both in terms of like eating better, eating healthier, but also just being more active. One of the doctors that I had during my time in the hospital had told me basically almost as like an ultimatum, like, you know, if you could ever walk 2 miles without stopping, like that would be like an Olympic level athlete, because based on where you're at right now, almost kind of saying that like you probably won't do that. And so from that point forward, that was like one of the first things that my wife and I started doing, is going for walks in our neighborhood. And I made it a point that we would not walk any less than 2 miles, because I was going to prove that that is exactly what I would do. And so it kind of started there. You know, I was actually in a coma for 3 weeks, so I actually had to relearn how to walk and things like that. And so then once I got my feet under me, I like I said, I started with walking like, okay, I'm going to walk a minimum of 2 miles every time I do this. And it kind of went from there, you know, as far as just being very mindful and cautious of what I was eating and drinking and those types of things. For me, though, it was a matter of the habits. You know, I knew what I should be doing. It was just a matter of actually doing it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that really good answer. I really like the idea of the sort of setting the daily minimum, or the activity minimum.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard of Alex Hormozy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big fan.
Yeah. And he talks about this like 100 a day thing. And back years ago when I was doing a doctorate in English literature, I sort of did the same thing. It's like I'd have to read 100 pages a day. And it was like, it was partly to sort of get, you know, accumulate over time and stuff like that, right? And like some days it'd be 300, sometimes it would be 100, but big type and big margins, if you know what I mean. But like setting that minimum for yourself, you feel good, like you've accomplished it, but also like over time, you know, eventually, you know, that minimum can go up and things like that, and it gives you a daily habit. So, and like that sounds like a really good answer. So writing about so Barret, you've been, you know, sort of doing fitness your whole life, it sounds like. But when you became a dad, that changed. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how it changed for you, even though you were, you know, you knew exactly what you were doing.
Yeah, that's the biggest key right there, is once I became a father, it all changed, because I used to be incredibly selfish, so I could spend hours and hours throughout the week at the gym or running or any sort of physical activity. But then once the baby came here, if you're a father, you're very well versed with how much time that they suck away from you, because they'll die if you don't pay attention to them or take care of them. So it was a big turning point for me of, okay, I still prioritize physical fitness, not only for the actual physical element, but the mental side mainly. How can I do that? And I struggled. I mean, for the first year or so, I mean, I only slept for 4 hours, at a maximum for like the first year. And I could tell my fitness was declining pretty rapidly, compared to how I've always been basically my whole life. And so I had to figure out ways to prioritize that or work around it. And that led me to kind of understand the struggles of my clients from when I was a 20-year-old alcoholic asshole, because they were all parents, probably. I mean, they were older, so I just assumed they were parents. But I just remember at one point I said to a client, and this was when it was like the turning point when I realized I shouldn't be a trainer at this point. I was like, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna like drink a handle of liquor, and I'm still gonna be in better shape than you. It's like it was just such a bad place for me mentally to be training people at that point. And now that I've been a parent and I understand the struggles of you work 9 to 5 and then you got to come home and then all the regular household stuff, plus on top of the child who, like I said, they require a lot of time so that they don't die. And I kind of wish I had still had the contact information for some of those people so I could reach out and be like, oh, I totally get it now. I'm really sorry for being that person. But yeah, that was the biggest thing for me is how can I still maintain a decent level of fitness? Because I'm never going to be as fit as I used to be. Not anytime soon anyways, but how can I still maintain a level that's okay in my mind while balancing the full-time career and the family and the wife and all of that stuff?
That's funny. It reminded me of something that a friend of mine sort of chided me with a while ago, where I was sort of probably complaining about something, and he goes, like, I don't have kids. And he goes, Len, if you had kids, half of the world would make way more sense to you than it does. There's a great actually episode of your podcast that you guys did together that I'll try and put a link to somewhere, where you talk about that being a sort of young, cocky trainer. And in particular, you would even, I think, not just think, but tell your clients that they were lazy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're sort of keeping more balls in the air than any normal person can juggle.
Yeah.
And I know, Jake, you talk about in that episode about how, you often, you commute to school like 40 minutes or something like that, and you have to be there all day. And then when you've got like football games on Friday nights, like you're probably there till midnight with your family and you come back. And so you're definitely on that end of the like, kind of like, just so many commitments, finding time to work out is really hard. How do you find the time?
So I think the biggest thing for me is multitasking different tasks throughout the day. I'm lucky now because our daughter is older. She's moved out, and then our boys are getting into middle school. We have twin boys that are 12, and so it's a little easier as they get older because they can be included in a lot of things. One of the big things in our family is family walks. That's one easy way that we can spend time together and then also get some steps in and get some movement in. And so that's a big thing for us. Sometimes we'll walk at school before everyone leave to go home. Now that football season is over for us, it's almost like, wow, we have all this extra time on our hands. What do we do? Because we're only gone for 10 hours a day instead of 15 hours a day or something like that, but doing things together is a big one. And even, I'm a big proponent of like doing things at home, like working out at home, like dumbbell workouts and stuff like that, things that you can do on the go or while you're doing stuff. One of the things that, Barret and I always talk about is we don't really say no to our kids if they want to do stuff with us, but yet you have to take care of yourself as well. So how do you do both of those? And so things like, I've got 12-year-old son. We wrestle a lot in our house, which is a great, full body exercise in and of itself when you're wrestling, 2 12-year-olds who are going to be as big as you are before long, so that's a big one too. But just being able to combine activities, how can I make the most use of my time doing things for myself to keep myself healthy while also doing stuff with my family, and that's a big one. I think another thing that helps is when you incorporate spending time while also doing certain things around the house. Like every family, you got to clean your house. You got to make dinner every night. One of the ways that my wife and I spend a lot of quality time together is making dinner. So that way, while we're making dinner, which is something we have to do anyway, that's a time for us to spend time together. Mm-hmm. And then whenever we're done, then I can go get a workout in or something like that, because I can check off all my boxes throughout the day. I can spend time with my kids, spend time with my wife, take care of work projects, and then find the time to still get a workout in. And so really the big thing is just how can I combine things throughout the day to make them the most efficient that they can be. Efficiency is a big word in our house.
Yeah, that's really great. For some reason that reminded me, I've got this old joke about like one of the reasons the gym exists is because if you did it at home, nobody would let you. They'd be like, oh, that doesn't really matter. Like you can stop. You don't need to do your workout today. I need you to help me do this, or I need to help you do that. And so going to the gym means like you're out of sight, you're out of mind. Maybe you're paying money and they're like, you better get some value out of that membership that you paid for or something like that. And it can play that role. But I was thinking, so one thing that I was sort of like not expecting when I was doing research for this interview was that, particularly on the podcast, but with both of your stories as well, it's a lot of people who've like overcome something themselves.
Yeah,
I think the first podcast I listened to that you were interviewing, Barret, was an alcoholic at one point. There was another guy who was very, very overweight and had to overcome that. And there's one very particular problem with changing yourself that's always preoccupied me, which is it's not just people who aren't supportive, you know what I mean, who might like not really take it seriously, but antagonistic to the change that you're making. So for example, like I did something years ago, like basically for health, which was like, look, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. I'm just not going to eat sugar. And that meant no dessert. And people get very, like even that simple thing, like saying no to dessert, people will get mad at you. They'll be offended. They'll take it personally. Not just because the normal thing of like offering you something that you decline or reject, but also like what you think you're better than me, kind of plays a big role. And that can play a role in like, if you've been an alcoholic, you've got probably you've got some alcoholic friends that you hang out with. And when you change, they might be like antagonistic towards that, not necessarily like undermine you, but like, I don't know. Yes. Well, actually undermine you.
Yeah. It's the crab in a bucket mentality. Like, have you ever heard the stories of crabs in a bucket? Like they could work together and most of them could climb over each other to where most of the crabs could actually get out and escape. But when you put them in that environment, they'll actually use their claws to pull each other back so that none of them can get out. Wow. And so that is the mentality where like misery loves company, basically. When people are unhealthy or if they're unhappy, they don't want to see you do well. They don't want to see you do things to help make yourself better, which is why, you have guys like Barret and I who are shouting from the mountaintops. There are people who will support you. There are people who want the best for you. There are people out there who have gone through, a lot of really bad, negative things, but has still found a way to be better because of them. And so I think, one of the reasons why I think we get along so well is that is one area that we're very like-minded. We don't just give you the parts that we want you to see. We show everything, because I don't personally think that you can truly appreciate someone's story unless you know every part of it, as far as the highs and the lows, and to know that there are people out there who will support you in your lows and help you get to your highs.
Yeah, that's really good. And just to ask you this a similar sort of question, Barret, but if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I've tried it. I tried something like this. I'm a dad, I wanted to get in better shape. And basically people kept, there's an old joke about the Canadian lobster trap. Like if a Canadian tries to succeed, the rest of the Canadians will pull them back down. But like, if there's someone listening who's like, I tried it and my family, they sort of got mad at me for trying to make my life better. What would you recommend they do if they try again? Like do it more subtly, maybe not boast about it so much. I don't know. Like it's really hard because if it's literally the people you're living with that are trying to stop you, maybe unconsciously even, what would you recommend people think about trying?
First thing I'd recommend is checking out our book, because there's going to be a lot of activities at the end of each page for dads specifically. But yeah, man, that one's tough because I don't really, I feel like I'm very different than most people. So in those situations where I do decide to change some element or aspect of my life, and there's someone, family or not, that doesn't agree or that I feel like will hold me back, I won't cut them out completely, but I will severely diminish their relationship or opinions that they have. And that's just how I deal with it personally. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to cut you out completely, I have before several times. If it does come to that point, like if you just really can't accept the changes I'm making in my life that are improving my life and therefore improving my life and my family and everyone around me, then I honestly don't have a problem just eliminating that person from my life. I don't have time for toxicity, and that's the way that I deal with it. Just severely dampen it. If it still continues, then sorry. Like I don't, like I said, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, no, that's a really great and very straightforward answer, and I think kind of a bracing and a very good one, right? Like whether you do it or not, keeping in mind the fact that you actually can, with most people, diminish that relationship if you need to. You're not bound to people in the same way that we often think we must be, which is not to say don't honor your relationships and don't take it seriously when you need to do something like this, but not everybody is always relating to you in the best way. One thing,
I got one comment on that. I recently tweeted about that exactly, and I tried to distill it in like a tweet so it was fairly easily digestible, but I said something along the lines of a superpower that I've come to realize for myself recently is saying the word no. And that's with obligations, with career, family, anything. If it doesn't align with my goals, I'm going to say no. And there's a lot of power in that. And a lot of people are afraid. There are a lot of people pleasers. And again, I'm always going to help. I'm always going to be willing to be there for anyone. But I'm going to say no a lot. And it's a take it or leave it at that point. I'm going to be firm, but I'm not going to be an asshole.
Yeah, that's very good, very well said. One thing that I know you guys talk about because it's not all fitness; it's about dads and being a dad, and then relating to children and stuff like that. One thing that again, not having kids myself, so the qualifier, I'm going to say everything I say about kids. But I was talking to a friend of mine who's a dad, and he was getting really worked up about how his 5-year-old son, like, no matter how many times he told him to like arrange the stuff he put in his backpack the right way, so everything would fit, he wouldn't do it. And he seriously was very worked up about this. He's like, how is he ever going to make it through life if he can't do that? And I said, well, my childless philosophy, having been one myself, I've always been of the view that like children are going to act like children when they're children, but they're going to act like the adults they saw when they were children when they become adults, right? So if you're finish the thought, like, if you're packing your backpack properly, when he grows up, that's what he'll do. He's acting like a kid now because he's a kid. And I guess maybe to you, Jake, what advice would you have to sort of fathers who are sort of getting worked up maybe about their kids not like quite acting quite like they wish they would?
Yeah, so it's funny. That is an ongoing topic at our house because during the day I'm a high school football coach, and I work with high school athletes, and so efficiency and all of those things are what we're striving for all day long. Whether we're on the practice field, the weight room, or whatever it is. And so sometimes I'll have to, or my wife will have to remind me, like at home, your kids are 12, they're not in high school. And, even when they were like 7 or 8, hey, they're not high school kids, like just tone it down a couple notches, And I think the big thing for me is just being reminding yourself a lot of the fact that, as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. I have focused more on what are like the core values that I want my kids to know, no matter what are the big things, decide what the big things are. And once you decide what the big things are, the other things will kind of work themselves out as they go. Like, for example, one of the things I've already kind of mentioned on this, honesty. Where does your bond is a saying in my house that I could literally bring my boys in from the other room right now on here, and all I would have to say is your word, and they would finish that sentence or that saying. That they actually pulled it on me on our drive home tonight, and because I wasn't even being dishonest, I was just kind of joking around with them, and it was just about something silly. And my one son, who's the more outspoken of the two of them, which he gets it from his father, but he's like, Dad, you always tell us your word is your bond. So come out with it. Just tell us the truth. What are we doing? And so for me, that's a big thing. And so I think it's really important for each mom or dad, really, what are your big things? Those are the things that are going to get the most attention. And then you'll go from there, is putting all of your papers in your backpack the exact right way a big thing? Well, I mean, organization is important, but is that as important as being a good person or being trustworthy, or being a good friend, those types of things. And so I think really, the more you throw at kids, the more rules and regulations and different things you try to do, the more they're going to get lost in the details. Whereas if you give them a few specific things and you kind of work from there and branch out, I think it's a lot more successful.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I've always thought that, teaching your kids principles, if you can, is more important than teaching them rules.
Yeah.
So like I always remember that. Like, I mean, I know, you don't want to second guess people's intentions too much, but I always remember going to like, there was always that kid's house where there was like a list of chores and they'd get a little star for each chore on the fridge or something like that, right? Which not to knock that as a practice or anything like that, but like I always thought like, once what happens when they leave home and they don't have the stars anymore? You know what I mean? Are they going to stop doing it because or very punishment-based kind of parenting, right? Like once they're free of the punishment, well, why would they do it? Because they're not going to get. Why wouldn't they do it, or why would they do it? Because they're not going to get punished anymore. And if it's a principle that they've internalized instead, which is like with a reason, like why should I be honest?
So I have the perfect example of that. Our daughter, I mentioned, she's 22 now, and so she doesn't live at home with us anymore. The typical kid growing up, didn't keep her room clean, probably didn't keep her papers straight in her backpack by any means. We constantly had to tell her to pick her dirty clothes up off the floor and put them in the dirty clothes basket that was 2 feet from her bed, that type of stuff. However, this was probably about 6 months ago. Got a call from her because we talked several times throughout the week, and she had a boy that she was, whatever they call it now, dating, talking, or whatever it is that they say. And she's like, yeah, I had to let him go. And I was like, well, why? And she was like, well, every time he would Snapchat me or text me, he was always supposed to be at work, but he was never at work yet. And so I would ask him, like, well, where are you at right now? You're supposed to be at work. And he's like, oh, it doesn't matter if I show up late. It'll be fine. It'll be fine when I get there. She's like, Dad, he doesn't have a very good work ethic. I can't be with him. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I would hug you through the phone right now. Like you talk about like, what are the big deals? Work ethic and working hard is something that is a big deal to us and our family. And that's something where, she may not have been always keeping her room the cleanest growing up, but what she does understand? How to expect a certain standard from people and have enough respect for herself to expect that even from a potential, partner. And so, that's just that I kind of was reminded of that story as you were saying that, like, you want to see them carry those with them. If you give them 1,000 different rules, they're never going to remember that. But if you have 5 or 6, these are the key principles, they can remember that for a lifetime.
Speaking of working hard, Barret, I wanted to ask you a question. So you take on a new client, say they get through I know you've got a little bit of a filter that people get through, and that's typical of trainers. You fill out a questionnaire and stuff like that. But, I remember when I was interviewing for a kind of, relatively high profile kind of investment banking job once, as entry level, when the interviewer said, so do you want to do the work or do you want to be an investment banker? And I'm like, oh, I want to do the work. But there's a lot of people I'm sure who are like, they see the guys with the, like, the ripped guys with the shirts off, and they see the picture and they're like, I want to be that. And it's like, but do you actually want to do the work though? And how do you try and, I assume you have some mechanism for trying to tell that, or what to do if you are working with a client and they're like, they want the end goal, but they don't understand that you have to, it's not going to come just by like eating the right supplement or something like that.
Yeah. I try to filter that out before I even begin working with someone like that. I kind of still have the asshole built into me, but it's more tailored and more refined at this point. So I honestly, I have built-in mechanisms in my questionnaire in and of itself. If they don't answer certain things correctly, it'll kick them out of the questionnaire and be like, I don't think we're a good fit. Like they won't even get to the point where I start training them. And before they even get to the questionnaire, I have chats with them and stuff, and I almost make them sell themselves to me because I tell them, like, listen, I don't want to waste my time helping someone who isn't going to put in the work. So I have a lot of built-in things before I even get started that I'm like with a 90% certainty that if they get to that point where I'm actually gonna build out all their programming and build out all their nutrition, because everything's 100% custom for that person. I don't do cookie cutter anything. So again, there's a lot of upfront time spent for me, and I value my time. Like I said, I'll say no real fast. So I have a lot of things built in to weed out people that aren't really there mentally, because that's really what it takes. I need people that are at their breaking point. They're like, I literally have no other option except to change, and I'm ready. And that's what I said. And I will say no. I've said no so many times.
One thing, one of the lessons I suppose in your book that I really liked too was the one about just to quote it here: as a father, an important situation you will inevitably be faced with is helping your children overcome their fears. And Jake, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, to sort of, because I imagine as a dad, if you see your kid being fearful of something, and maybe even something you were never fearful of yourself as a kid, right? There can be a little bit of it mixed in with all the pragmatism and the long term. There can be a little bit of disappointment too. What would you recommend if you're a dad and you notice that one of your kids is kind of afraid of something you really don't think they should be afraid of? What can you do to help them overcome that?
So there's a saying that I use sometimes: lessons over lectures. And basically what that means to me is, everything in life is an opportunity to learn, or to have a teachable moment within it. And so I think for me, I as a parent, your initial reaction is to immediately jump in and try to quote unquote fix the problem. And there's nothing wrong with that in terms of, it's an honest, willingness to try to help your kid. But the downside of that is that they may or may not be learning the lesson for themselves. They may not be learning to find solutions to their own problems. And I think as a parent, there's a very fine line that you have to kind of walk this tightrope a little bit. And the rope changes as they get older, right? I mean, as like Barret has a newborn, or almost a newborn, I think 20 months, I believe. And, obviously that's different than my 12-year-olds. And then my 12-year-olds, it's different than our daughter who's 22. And so that where that line falls changes. But the big thing is finding the balance between stepping in and offering the guidance and the solution versus kind of just trying to lead them to find the solutions on their own. I think, it's way more powerful for them when they can kind of, whether it's assisted or not, come to a solution on their own. I think kids are way more capable than what we sometimes remember that they are, or give them credit. And I think it's important to give them the opportunity to try to own those fears, and then own the solutions to find them. Because, at the end of the day, there comes a point where we won't necessarily be there to help them. And so it becomes, what have they learned from you, and what have they discovered as far as how to apply those things? And so I think the big thing is just guidance, but also letting them also find solutions.
That you said something there that really resonated with me. Way back in the day, I was a summer camp counselor, and so it was a weekly camp. And every week I'd get 5 new boys from 5 different families with 5 different fathers, if they had a father. And often the fathers did not have a sense of how capable their kids were, and they tell me he needs this and he needs that and he needs help with this and he needs help with that. And sometimes as soon as dad was out the door, the kid was just like in charge of that tent. helping other people out and stuff like that. And I remember one very striking experience I had with a kid. This is related to fear and giving them a chance, where we had a zip line that went across this like crevasse. And one of our activities was to do the zip line. And so we had like a counselor in training on the other end and me on the sort of end you got in, the first end. And one of the kids was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And all I said was, okay, have a seat. And then the rest of the kids did it, and they did it a couple times, and they were obviously having fun. And after a while, he's just kind of sheepishly is like, when can I go now? And it was quite, it was just sort of amazing how just giving them the opportunity to make it a choice of their own instead of something that they were forced to do or felt they had to do really made a difference in that case.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's, like I said, they're way more able than what we sometimes remember or think that they are. And, kids can solve a lot of amazing things just on their own, and maybe occasionally a pointer here or there.
Just the last question I want to ask you guys about the book, I'll ask you, Barret, just to give people a sense of the scope of the kind of things you guys write about so thoughtfully. One thing you write about is, part of being a dad is typically means being married. And an important part of that is keeping romance alive over time. Can you talk a little just for a moment about your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'll let Jake answer that one too, because he's got a great one. But
okay.
Yeah, just dating your wife. That's my biggest takeaway from it all. And it's a struggle. Again, similar. I think my frame of reference is a little narrow right now just because the baby is so young. But when she gets a little more older and we can get babysitters and stuff, I mean, it has been like that the past 4 or 5 months where we're able to leave her for an evening, not anything overnight yet, but just being able to still date your wife, I think that one is so key for maintaining that relationship. Oh, I think my camera just dropped. Yeah, let me switch cameras, I guess. Jake, if you want to go ahead and share yours.
Sure. No, my big thing that I think of with marriage, my wife and I have been married about 14 and a half years. It'll be 15 years next summer. And so the big thing on my end is always remembering in the chain of priorities, your marriage has to come first. And that's easy to get lost in as you have kids and as you have more kids or newborns, babies, toddlers, all the way working up. My wife and I actually, one of the things that we struggled with was we mentioned our 2 boys, one of them back in 2018 had been diagnosed with leukemia, and he's doing great now. He's in remission. He's doing wonderful, no issues anymore and everything. But for those 2 years when he was going through treatments, we almost forgot about being married for those 2 years, really. And we were parents first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And occasionally we were married, you know what I mean? Like here and there. And that put a strain on our marriage, and I think you have to always find ways to make your marriage the priority. And it can be simple things, really. Like one of the big ones for my wife and I, we have a regularly scheduled date day every weekend where either on Saturday or Sunday, we go out to lunch and we also go and do the grocery shopping for the week. And it seems like, oh man, that's real romantic, lunch and grocery shopping. But really, it's more than that for us. It's a way for us to connect every week and also to plan our week, because our grocery shopping is built around our meal planning, and a meal planning is built around all the weekly activities that we have going on, whether it's, this podcast or this function that our boys have or whatever it is. And so it's a way for us to reset, reconnect, reevaluate, get ready for the next week, and build intimacy and build, that quality time together. And so, that is a huge thing for us. And then the other one, which is kind of my answer for everything, is honesty. There is no one on this earth that I am more honest with than my wife, and vice versa, and even to the point that there's times where other people will look at us and almost be shocked or offended almost in a way. Like, you say that to each other? And it's like, hell yeah, I say that because I know for a fact that that woman right there is the one person on this earth that I can tell anything to, and I can share anything. And I know that, you know, I'm going to be able to confide in her. And I know that if she tells me something, it's the truth, and it's nothing but the truth. I don't have to worry about, you know, well, that's what she said, but is that what she really means, or all those types of things? You know, we mean what we say what we mean. And so I think in order for it to really, any relationship really, but especially a marriage, I think if you can't be truly honest with each other, you're only really operating on partial capacity.
Speaking of relationships and honesty, just moving on to the last part of the interview where we talk about the people's work as content creators. So you guys are co-authors of this book, and you're publishing it in progress as well. And I was wondering, how do you handle that? Do you write, you know, do you have an outline, like we're going to do these 50 or 100 lessons, and then each divvy them up? One of you writes it and the other one edits it or comments. How are you doing writing a book together?
Good question. It's really not too structured, to be honest with you. We both have our newsletters, so we kind of recycled some of the lessons and refined them specifically for this book. And it's bare bones, as we're just sharing a Google Doc right now, and you just write whatever your day is for that day. There's no particular outline at this point. It might be, we'll be getting, I mean, we're up to page 54, 55 right now. We got to drop in a new release here. That's one of the things I love about Leanpub, by the way. But yeah, nothing too crazy. It's just a shared Google Doc, and we're writing it all like that, one day at a time.
Yeah, that's really great. And it's I love the idea of, like, you know, you're starting out with a Google Doc, and this is like sort of in a way like the canonical Leanpub book, like just get something out there, write the words, take care of that first. You know, find out how to collaborate. You'll maybe change your mind. Maybe you'll come back to Google Docs, something like that. But that's really, really great, sort of, you know, healthy lesson for people out there. People can often think like, oh, I can't get started on the journey until I know where I'm going to be at the end or something like that. And like, no, writing doesn't have to be like that. And that's kind of what Leanpub's all about. Barret in particular, I know you're on a lot of different channels. You know, like you're on YouTube with your podcast, you're on Substack, your newsletter and stuff like that. And I guess, how do you, let's assume like people have figured out how, like they're confident enough that they're going to get there, that they're up on all these channels and they've got their profile pictures up and maybe some branding and stuff like that. How do you decide what to do? Like, do you have a schedule for, like, I'm going to do Substack newsletter for like half an hour a day, or I'm going to focus on the podcast for the next month? Or do you have is there any structure to it?
It's pretty fluid right now, honestly. It is somewhat structured as far as I release the Substack every week. That one's the most structured one. Get more into the video stuff again now that the baby's kind of older, and I can get out and script and write a little bit more for the video. And I've also got a crazy race coming up, so I really want to document everything involved with that, because it's a ridiculous race, and how I'm going to balance that with fatherhood, I think, will be very great content for people to consume and try to understand how. I mean, I'm running an entire country. That's the race, so I got 40 weeks. I got 40 weeks to train for it, so it's a lot of content, and also a lot of how am I going to juggle all that when I have like a 4-hour run on Saturday. But as far as scheduling and stuff, yeah, it's fairly fluid right now. And with the thing that Jake and we're actually like converging everything together into one cohesive structure here soon. And we'll be rebranding things a bit to the actual DadFit Dynasty versus both of our individual. Right. And then Jake's more Dynasty related things. So it's going to be an awesome 2024 for the stuff that we're putting out and the things that we're going to be doing. Again, we're going to be combining newsletters. We're going to start co-hosting the podcast. There's just a bunch of different things. Obviously, the book. Bunch of things in the pipelines that we're working on. Super excited about it all, by the way.
That sounds a little exciting.
sometimes.
Yeah, no, that sounds very exciting. I didn't know about that. That's really great to hear. I'm sure you guys will do really good work together. The last question I always like to ask on the podcast, if the guests are Leanpub authors, is if there was one thing about Leanpub that had you shaking your fist, going, "Damn you, Leanpub," every time you log on, or if there was one, like something broken, or if there was some magical feature you could imagine we could build for you, and you could ask us for anything, can you think of anything you would ask us to do?
Yeah, there's been a few things. I haven't messed around with the GitHub stuff. Again, my background software engineering, so I automate everything. I'm a DevOps engineer, so
Right.
like I build out all of the automation for the engineers themselves. So I think, and again, I haven't messed with the GitHub stuff, but a way to auto publish would be helpful. And again, it might be there. I haven't really messed around much with it. And the other one is it's good for you on a business side, but I want analytics without paying for it. Which, I mean, good business move on your side, because I talk myself out of it quite often. But I think once we finally finish and get it actually out there, and we were looking at the your promotional stuff as well, like putting it in your newsletter and stuff like that. So I think once we actually finalize it and start promoting it more than just tweets here and there and auto plugs and stuff on Twitter, then I'm sure I'll take the plunge and get the analytics, because that'll just help be able to refine where the sources are coming from and double down on the ones that are actually driving stuff, instead of just throwing it all out there and seeing where it's coming from. So yeah, those are my biggest things with it. Other than that, man, Leanpub, again, coming from the engineering background, the whole lean methodology and lean startup, I mean, I love that book, and everything about Leanpub is right up my alley for lean startups. And I've built out several apps and stuff before, and I always release garbage just to see what the market responds to. And I love that approach from the publishing side of it. And when I brought it up to Jake, he really liked that too. I'm like, dude, let's drop it on here, put it out. They have a landing page for us. We can capture the emails. It's like a lead gen as well. And it's also, if people actually buy it before it's even done, clearly there's interest. So that'll kind of incentivize or motivate us to work even more towards it.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Those are really good points to bring up. The first thing I would say about GitHub is that we do have an API so that you could actually publish from the command line. In fact, I think we just got a bug report about it not working or something like that. But we do have an API, so you can do stuff, without having to go into the UI all the time and click buttons and things like that. And when it comes to analytics, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, whenever you're like, one of the reasons we make you pay for GitHub or Dropbox mode as well is, like, whenever you're integrating with a third-party service, there's support for someone else's product that's happening. And if you ever do sign up for it and start using Google Analytics within our ecosystem, you'll be asking me, you'll probably be like, fix this, fix that, like there will be things. And there's also a lot of explaining, right? Because people are like, we definitely wouldn't want to be like, go read the Google Docs, on how to do analytics. No, we need to understand it as well. And Google Analytics in particular, incredibly powerful, notoriously complex, and ever changing. And so support for it actually is like, now the flip side of it is, why does it exist? Well, to help people sell stuff, basically, and to know where to invest their time and energy and money if they have it for advertising and stuff like that. So if you find that you're getting like a certain type of Substack post is generating more leads than others, and that's what you're focusing on, then you'll write more posts like that, and you can find this out from Google Analytics and things like that. So would our authors and by extension us, because we only make money if our authors do, would we make more money if we made it free? Maybe. But for now, yeah, Google Analytics integration is behind a paywall.
Yeah, like I said, it's a great business move, and I would do that if I was on your side too. But my only other comment on it is, why only Google Analytics? There's a lot of other ones, I guess, that aren't Google. I'm not the biggest fan of Google in general, but I guess that would be a great question.
Yeah, the answer, I mean, I think we do still have support for something called Clicky, but like that's like 12 years old or something like that. I don't even know if it still exists really. But the basic answer to that is like legacy. It's like why do we have, I mean, we have PayPal and we have Stripe for receiving payments from people, and we have PayPal and now Wise for paying authors. Well, why PayPal? Legacy. I mean, Leanpub was launched in 2010. There are people who have problems with PayPal too. And that's why one of the reasons we introduced Stripe. But why Google Analytics? It was, the first kind of big one that everybody knew about. So that's why we've got it. But I'll note your vote to the team for something else, because here I am complaining about it and saying it's so hard to use that we make people pay, and so that might be like a kind of self-answering kind of explanation for what we should do next. Well, guys, thank you very much for being on the Leanpub Front Matter podcast. I really appreciate it. For everyone watching, please get the book. Please give it a try. It's really good. It's DadFit Dynasty Daily. It's just an excellent book with lots of excellent lessons and stuff like that in it. And it's going to be growing. It's one of these books that gets bigger over time. Everybody please... DadFit Dynasty Manual. I was looking at the file name, not the title. But yeah, you'll find it anywhere that you're looking for it on Leanpub. Just search and you'll get it. And yeah, thanks very much, guys, for taking the time to do this.
Awesome. Great to be on.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.